Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to be talking today about all things muscle growth. And I feel like this topic is often positioned around protein, eating lots of protein, and the best training program, right? But I actually think boiling it down to those two things is quite reductive, and it doesn't really encapsulate all of the things that actually move the needle for muscle growth. So I wanted to start this off by framing the three things that are really needed when it comes to wanting to build muscle tissue. So we're going to be looking at the stimulus, which is our training. Okay, we also need to look at the nutrition, which is the fuel and the engine for you to produce the right kind of stimulus when you're in the gym. But this does go way beyond just protein. And then the repair piece, which is essentially not just your recovery, but also how you're managing all of the other aspects of your life alongside things like sleep and stress and general load and volume management. Now, in most cases, if you've been training a pretty long time, let's say 6 months or more, and you are capturing all of the evidence and the evidence is suggesting that you're not making progress towards building muscle, then it is going to be one of those three things, frankly. There is no other option. Everybody is capable of building muscle. It might just be that one of these three things are not quite aligned in the way that they maybe could be. So we're going to start with the stimulus, which is our strength training. I say strength training because of course you can build muscle doing other things, but by far and away, the most powerful and effective method is via resistance training, strength training in the gym. Now you can eat protein until you're blue in the face. You can sleep 10 hours a night every single night. You can live the life of a monk in terms of stress management. But if you're not applying the right kind of stimulus, there will be no muscle growth. This is the absolute non-negotiable, and they do have a kind of hierarchy. Training sits at the top. So when we think about training, again, there are going to be lots of elements to this, but I'm going to start with the most important one in my view. This is around training intensity. Now, most people probably know by now that you need to be training within close proximity to failure. Okay, you need to have built up a good level of training intensity. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, yeah, I do that. Well, the thing is, with training with intensity, it's quite subjective. And a lot of the time, if you think, okay, I had 2 reps left, a lot of the time when people first come into coaching, I'm looking at training videos, I'm going, there's at least 5 there. And maybe they don't film their reps all that often and look back and really ask that question. They haven't quantified what hard really is. Hard isn't a feeling, it's not a burn, it is training within close proximity to failure. And that is a skill. It's not something that you can walk into the gym day one and do. Okay, you need to build up a little bit of training experience, honestly, training knowledge, to get to a point where you can confidently train close to failure. Now, how close is close enough? Well, we know that the research tells us anywhere between 1 and 3 reps in reserve is going to provide a good muscle growth stimulus. So you don't need to be training to complete failure at all, technically, but I would suggest that you do every now and again, simply because of the reason I just mentioned. Most people think they're training close to failure, but they are not. So their RIR2, I have 2 reps left in the tank, may well be more like RIR5. Okay, so taking sets all the way to failure every now and again is objectively a good idea, because then once you know where failure is, it's much easier to reverse engineer and figure out where 1 to 3 reps shy truly is. Now you do want to still be applying good form. Okay, this is what we mean by failure. We mean it's close to not being able to do another rep with good form. That's what I'm talking about here. So we're not talking a half rep. We're not talking a rep where you've had to use your entire body to produce momentum to get that rep up. We want to be isolating the muscle group that we are using. So we want effort, of course, but we also want control, and we also want full range of motion. So rep 1 and let's say rep 10, just for argument's sake, they actually should look pretty similar in terms of technique. The thing that should look different is the speed of the rep. So you want to be looking at reps, say 9 and 10, as a 10 rep set example. They should be slower to complete. Bicep curl is the easiest one to demonstrate. They might start off nice and smooth, but towards the end, you will find that they start to get harder to finish. But in terms of technique and execution, they should look the same. We're not getting sloppy towards the end. So where possible, we want most of our training to be happening within that kind of 1 to 3 RIR. Another element to training is volume management. Now, I see people drastically under and overshoot this when it comes to gearing their training towards muscle growth. So we want to think about, firstly, the muscle groups we're wanting to develop in any one training block. The reality is you are not going to be able to massively develop your glutes and your quads and your back and your chest and your delts and your biceps all at the same time, okay? You will need to periodize what is most important to you in any given moment. So you might have a training block that focuses on glutes and back, okay? And then it's more like maintenance volume for the other major muscle groups. So we don't want to just be training glutes and back, but we do want to bias our volume towards the areas we want to see more growth in. Now, the right amount of volume is so specific. So of course, years ago in my early coaching career, I'd be following the evidence. That's something I will always do. And that tells us that north of 10 and probably south of 30 sets per muscle group per week is going to be optimal for muscle growth. But what I've really found in the real-time application of coaching hundreds of people, that actually the right amount of volume is so dependent on the person. Now, I do find that anything below 10 does tend to produce not so good results. So we definitely want a baseline of around 10 sets per muscle group per week. And for some people, 10 sets might be perfect. For others, it might be that they want more like 15 to 20 sets per muscle group per week. I have never programmed anywhere near 30 though. Okay, so it aligns with the research, my real life experience of it. But I do also appreciate that the exact number is highly variable based on what someone can actually properly execute against and recover from. Because volume without being able to recover properly is just fatigue. It's not stimulus. So I prefer to start at that lower end, around 10 working sets per muscle group per week. And then you can add and change over time. If you notice that recovery is in a good place, you're not feeling chronically sore, you are seeing that overtime training is progressing, all of those things are good signs, and frankly, you have the time and the inclination to add more volume in, then you can do that. Try adding a couple of sets a week and see how that feels. But the overarching message is more doesn't necessarily equal better here. And if you notice that all of those things I've just mentioned around performance improving and feeling good, well recovered, if those things are not happening, then it's a sign that you've probably overshot it. So pull back a little bit. You might have noticed that I've yet to say the magic 2 words of progressive overload, which I have no doubt if you're watching this video, you will have heard of before, and how it is essential for muscle growth. It is, okay? But I think the way it's positioned sometimes suggests that it's something that you can directly control. I'm going to apply progressive overload today. That's just not how it works. With all the will in the world, you can go in and do your damn best, but you cannot guarantee that you're going to get another rep. Progressive overload happens to you if you are training with the right level of volume, training with the right intensity, close proximity to failure, recovering well. If you're lucky, progressive overload happens to you. Okay, so yes, we want to be chasing progression, but we don't directly have control over when and how much that happens. And then lastly, when we're thinking about training, we've kind of ticked the boxes of volume and of effective stimulus. We also want to make sure that if we're doing all those things, we are taking sufficient rest periods between exercises. I almost didn't include this, but it's been something that, again, over my years of coaching has come up time and time and time again. People are kind of saying, well, what am I supposed to do in the 2 minutes that you've told me to rest? I'm going to be scrolling through my phone. Can I do some stretching? Can I do some body weight movements? No, you really should need that rest. You should need every second of that rest. I'd never program under 60 seconds worth of rest, ever. Because if we're looking at muscle growth, you want to be able to approach each of those working sets with the right level of readiness. You're already going to have found that by set 3, you're not feeling as ready as you were in set 1, let alone if you're only taking 30 seconds of rest and just hoping for the best. So usually I find the sweet spot to be somewhere between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. It really depends on the movement. A big barbell back squat, you're probably going to want closer to 3 minutes. Something like a bicep curl, maybe closer to 90 seconds. It really depends on how quickly you can recover from that movement, but rest periods throughout are essential. So really, those are the main principles that you need to be thinking about when it comes to your training to provide the right stimulus, okay? So stimulus is now coming in exactly how we want it to. Training is perfect. What is the thing that changes that stimulus into muscle tissue? That is where the nutrition and the recovery pieces really come into their own. And in a lot of cases, with women I'm working with who are hard workers, they usually are quite type A, they're usually quite perfectionist, they're not someone who I'm kind of really pushing to get to the gym. They don't have a problem with getting to the gym. It's almost as though we need to be thinking about, okay, you probably need to chill out a little bit, you probably need more rest, you probably need more food. That's the reason you're not seeing the progress that you want, because actually the training is already dialed in. So I truly think these are, almost as important as the training when it comes to the types of results that you get. So let's touch on nutrition. Now, again, it would be remiss of me not to mention protein, because of course it is necessary. You do need to be eating a decent level of protein. Now, when we think about how much, the literature tells us somewhere between 1.6 and 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight is likely the sweet spot. But interestingly, and more recently, we've come to understand that actually that 1.6 mark is where you get the lion's share of the result. Okay, so if you are already someone who struggles to get in high levels of protein and you're aiming for 2 grams per kilo of body weight, you're going to be fine to just aim for 1.6. Okay, but if it's not something that bothers you, if you can quite easily do it, if you've got a big appetite and you want to feel really, really satisfied after meals, so you prefer to get high protein meals in throughout the day, fine, aim for close to that 2.2. But really 1.6 is kind of that threshold where we start to see maximum muscle protein synthesis. Okay, so we've touched on protein and I am going to move on, because as much as it's important, it's not the main issue that I see personally. In fact, more of the problems tend to come from just eating enough overall. So the process of building muscle mass is really metabolically expensive. So unless you are giving your body enough resources for it to feel as though, okay, I've got resources to go around here, I've got some spare, then it's going to be really difficult for you to see actual muscle growth, okay? Now, when we say eating enough, the thing I usually use for this in the first instance, before we've got much data, true body data, biofeedback, is a calorie calculator. Any calorie calculator, honestly. It kind of spits out a number, it's not accurate, of what your expected maintenance should be. Now, we're not taking this as gospel, we're taking it as a starting point. So if your expected maintenance is popping out at, say, 2,200 calories, and you know full well that you've been eating 1,600 calories for the last 3 years because you're scared to put body weight on, then you can see that there is a big old delta that we need to be closing. And it's also important to remember that that number that it's spat out, that is also not your ceiling. Okay, so even if you're eating in alignment with that, if you already have a decent level of muscle mass, if you are already a very, very active person, and you have the genetic factor of your metabolic rate that no calculator or really any easy to do test can tell you about, then it might well be that you can actually eat a bit more than what your calculator is telling you. A calculator tells me my maintenance is around 2,100, and I can guarantee you I eat hundreds of calories more than that every single day. So it's not a fixed number, but it is a starting point. And if you're eating well below it, that is a sign that you need to be working on upregulating your metabolism to get it to a position where you are at least at expected maintenance. So it's a decent floor, but it's certainly not a ceiling. So when it comes to that scenario, you're eating a lot less than the expected maintenance calories, and how you know you're in that position, generally there are signs. Okay, so there are signs that you're not eating enough, in that you're just not able to train with the right level of intensity that you're wanting to. You're feeling pretty beaten up as a result of training. You're cold quite a lot of the time, particularly hands and feet. You're not sleeping very well. You might wake up in the middle of the night and feel hungry. You might have some hormonal disruption, perhaps irregular periods or a missing period even. All of those things, okay, are generally signs from the body that there just isn't quite enough energy to go around and to perform the non-essential things, right? Like a period, as an example, or warming the fingers, right? So those are really signs that you're wanting to do something about that lack of energy availability. And you are going to want to gradually and slowly increase those calories over time to get you close to that expected maintenance. That is going to be a much better place to try and build muscle tissue from than a place of energy conservation, right? If it doesn't have plentiful resources, why on earth would it spend them on something as non-essential as building muscle mass? The final thing I wanted to mention on nutrition are carbs. Okay, so carbs have had such a bad rep, but they are so, so important when we think about really any kind of high intensity exercise. So carbs are our body's preferred energy source, okay? Most of your brain is run exclusively on carbs. Most of the energy required by your brain is carbs, right? So, and when you're thinking about exerting your muscles in the gym, you want your glycogen stores, your stored carbohydrate, you want that to be plentiful. When it is, you will find that you're able to train harder, you're able to recover better, and also energy levels tend to improve drastically when you think about increasing carbs. So again, this does depend on the person and just how active they really are, but we're likely looking somewhere between 3 to 5 grams of carb per kilo of body weight. Okay, so if we're in a position now where we are 60 kilos, 3 times 60 kilos, I'm testing my maths, is 180. So at a minimum, we're aiming for 180 grams of carbs. If you know that you're eating less than 100 on a daily basis, then there's room for some work to be done here. Carbs are particularly important around training windows, specifically before your workout. Now, training fasted versus training non-fasted, you don't really need to worry all too much about the hormonal impact, you wrecking your hormones if you train fasted. The reason I suggest eating some carbs before a workout is quite literally for the energy, the fast releasing energy that we need when we're doing high intensity exercise. I trained fasted for years and years and years and never really found that it impacted me until I started training really hard, okay? Then I thought, God, I'm getting quite hungry half an hour into this session. Maybe I could do with something before I train. Started eating a small serving of carbs, a slice of toast, a banana, a couple of rice cakes. Doesn't need to be complicated, but carb focused, something that digests well, that makes a huge difference to overall training output. So enough food overall, most important thing. Making sure that our energy in matches at least our expected energy needs. Making sure that overall metabolic health is in a good place. Enough carbs, and of course protein, but I feel like we've already given protein its flowers for the last 10 years. Okay, so the recovery piece is the third part of our equation, and this often gets overlooked or misinterpreted. So by recovery, I don't mean foam rolling or theragunning or ice baths or saunas or infrared or whatever the fuck. I mean lying down on the sofa, chilling out. I mean doing not very much outside of your general training schedule. So if you are someone who currently strength trains, 3 to 4 times a week, and also is running 3 to 4 times a week, and is also getting 15,000 steps a day, and also has a very, very busy, stressful job where they're on their feet all day, like, you can see there is really no time for that recovery to be taking place. So I'm not saying don't get your steps in. Okay, steps are important for health and just general wellness, like you want to be moving a little bit throughout the day. But everything you do is a stressor on the body, okay? Some good, some not so good, but some are technically good stresses, but it's still stress. So if we find that we are running around all day, every day, we are incredibly, incredibly active, there really is no time for that repair process to happen. If sleep is in the toilet, again, it's going to be really difficult to see muscle growth, muscle development. So sleep is really where that tissue repair happens, where that nervous system recovery happens, right? We absolutely need it. It is not optional for us to be getting decent sleep. Also, a lack of sleep tends to disrupt hunger hormones a little bit. So we tend to see that we feel a lot hungrier. There are lots more cravings for certain types of foods. So again, that makes it harder for us to hit the kind of nutritional goals that we're wanting to around predominantly whole foods, high protein, good carbs, good fiber. All of those things are harder when it's full with, random snacks and sweet treats throughout the day because cravings are so high due to lack of sleep. So I try to reframe recovery for people who are a little bit reluctant to resting as recovery and training are not opposing goals. They are not working in opposition to each other. They are literally working together. Better recovery allows you to train harder, to train more effectively, and to train more often. It sounds counterproductive because you're thinking, well, if I don't rest, then I can train more. Not quality. You can't be doing well in those training sessions if you're not allowing any time to recover. And you might not even realize it, but if you were to start giving yourself a little extra rest, you might just be surprised at how much more you can do when it comes to your gym performance. And you also want to be tracking your progress when it comes to muscle growth. Now, I appreciate if we're eating at maintenance, right? We're not in a fat loss phase. It just isn't as gratifying, nowhere near as gratifying as fat loss, because week to week you're like, oh, wow, a new line, or oh, my jeans fit a little bit better. Like, it's pretty fast acting. Week to week you're going to see changes. Muscle growth at maintenance is not that gratifying. So we don't really want to be using the scales, honestly, because it doesn't tell us anything particularly helpful. Body weight is likely remaining roughly stable. It might even be going up ever so slightly over time, but like nothing drastic. So it's not super valuable data. What is valuable is how our body actually looks and what our body is able to do. So I would suggest taking monthly progress photos in the same setting every single time, looking for subtle changes month to month in key development areas. I would also be taking some measurements, again, month to month, usually at the same time each month, particularly if you're a female, because, you know, we don't want to be taking it 5 days into our luteal stage and noticing that we're really bloated and then taking it on, you know, a different week next month and realizing that we look completely different in terms of measurements. So same time month to month, again, key areas. If you're trying to grow glutes, measure your glutes. You know, you're trying to keep your kind of waist in a similar area to where it is, measure your waist too, keep an eye on it. Like any of those areas you think are key to you, start capturing those. And of course, your lifts, right? So I'm not necessarily saying week to week you need to be seeing things improve, like they won't, okay? Like stress, sleep, all of those things, nutrition, just general mood, energy, all of that, day-to-day fluctuations in those things are going to influence how you perform more than anything else. But we are again looking at probably month to month. Have I improved on this one particular lift at all in the last 3 months? If the answer is no, then there's a good sign that something is off when it comes to the muscle building equation, because if they are tracking upwards, then we should see that the lifts are increasing too. You can only technically lift heavier without it being a neurological adaptation, a muscular and strength adaptation, if you have built the muscle that allows you to now lift heavier. Okay, you don't lift heavier to build muscle, you build muscle and then can lift heavier. It's a little bit like the progressive overload analogy I was using earlier. So training is the stimulus, nutrition is the fuel and the engine, and then recovery is where the growth actually happens. So if you're wondering why you're not seeing the progress, think about those 3 buckets. Pick your weakest one, work on that first. I guarantee you that will help give you some answers as to what needs to change over time to allow you to continue moving forward. And if you feel like you need some support on this kind of journey, this is exactly what we do inside the Recomp Blueprint. Coaching doors are currently closed until September. You can join the waitlist in the link that I'll pop in the description for you. And that is everything for this week. I hope you found it helpful. As always, you can pop your questions in the comments. I'll see you this time next week. Love you. Bye.